in Baltimore and WNST.net. We are through the Memorial Day holiday, and this guy's toweling off from selling all those cars over there at Coons Ford Security Boulevard in a long holiday weekend. Dan, I'm excited about summer, other than my allergies, and I had to talk to Brian Sander off about that, and what's going on with this pollen count out there. But it's been this is nice. I mean, even with the Orioles not being relevant right now, it's bought me some time for some Baltimore positive. I think we focus a little bit more on the Ravens, and I know you and I are about to do that. But OTAs, we got minicamp. It feels like there's a little bit more focus on the Ravens the next couple of weeks because the Orioles are so irrelevant right now.
Yeah, that's true. And we just had the OTAs we have a very young team, a lot of new pieces, a new offense being installed. They're starting with Gerald McCoy. Lots of things going on. It's going to be a very competitive camp, very compelling. And I saw your segment with Luke earlier, and I think you guys are right. This team could win 6 games. It can win a dozen games, so someplace in between. Lots of camp battles for sure. Going to be very, very interesting to see what they do.
Well, then, the one thing Luke and I talked about here is the difference in the heartbeat is so dramatic when look, I'm a veteran guy, bro. I came off the boat with him, right? I mean, I came off the boat with Rob Burnett and Michael Jackson and, Anthony Pleasant and those guys. To see where they are now with this incredible movement of Flacco and Weddle and Suggs, Mosley to where they are, there really has been a little bit of a heart transplant, and it's fascinating to watch the different sort of ebb and flow of all of it. There's a different energy in a different way than what there's been over the last dozen years, and for that, I'm interested in it. I mean, it's drawn me to it in a good way, and I don't believe they're going to win 12 games, by the way. I mean, I'm not optimistic about them, but I'm interested in them.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. And look, I like youth, I like energy, I like enthusiasm and what it presents, and I think the Ravens are probably a year away. I'm looking at 2020 where they have more cap space, they'll have more draft picks to play with. But this is a great year to solidify the foundation, a great year to see Lamar Jackson, if he can take that next step forward and lead this team and get all these pieces to work together to be cohesive. But in 2020, maybe they'll bring in another offensive lineman or two and add a couple more key pieces to make a real strong run. But look, let's face it, this is a team that went 6-1 the last 7 games. I know that the defenses they faced they weren't the world beaters, but they beat who they had to beat. They beat the teams that were on the schedule. But I think there's good cause for optimism. And look, youth, enthusiasm, energy, all that stuff, a lot of times they win games, and if they can catch lightning in the bottle, much like they did last year towards the end, the sky's the limit for this team. They're very well coached. I just saw the Sporting News named John Harbaugh as the 6th best head coach in the NFL. I think he's top 5 material for my money. But
do we underrate that, Dan? I mean, you run a place, I run a place. At times when my place has been well run, we've been a great company. At times when it hasn't been well run, we have not been and the Ravens, for all of the bluster of everything else that ever goes on anywhere else, where there's a coach on the hot seat or there's a jerk player, trying to get Mike Tomlin fired in Pittsburgh, right? You have all of these circumstances. I mean, here we've had the Ray Rice punch, right? We've had all of these things that have happened. But the leadership and what happens when they turn on a dime in the middle of the season and somehow Harbaugh saves his job, gets an extension, all of the things that have happened here over the last year, but the last dozen years, where we're moving from Newsom to DaCosta. And I almost laugh when I have, I did Denver radio 2 weeks ago, Den, and after Flacco came out and said something, I'm not here to mentor the young guy or whatever, and they put me on, and I'm talking to them, and they're asking all these sort of leading questions about Ozzie Newsome and Eric DaCosta, who's running it. And I'm like, these guys have been praying together for 20 years. They had this secession plan sort of sorted out. I don't think there's any surprises there. I don't question the leadership around the Ravens place as much as I'm always questioning that across the parking lot, right? But with the Ravens, there is this sense that they're not going to beat themselves with their coaching.
No, you know what? Organizations win championships, so we've seen a great example of that in all throughout sports, from the Golden State Warriors to the New England Patriots. And speaking of the Patriots, I think Bill Belichick is the only head coach that I would exchange John Harbaugh for. The other guys they have rank ahead of him, Sean McVay. I mean, come on, the guy hasn't proven himself yet in the NFL. Sean Payton, Andy Reid, Pete Carroll, they all have their own issues. But I think, to me, John Harbaugh's a top 3 head coach, definitely top 5, and certainly not number 6. But from an organizational standpoint, they're aces. It's a great place to be. They treat their players right. The castle is a state-of-the-art facility, and you can't ask for any better on that. They're the conversation year in and year out, and as season ticket holders, long-time season ticket holders, and fans, we couldn't ask for a better scenario.
He is Dennis Koulatsos. He is at Coons Ford Security Boulevard. He's a little hoarse today because he was busy selling hundreds of cars out there over Memorial. Give a little plug for your, not just the Thursday show and what you're doing here on Sunday mornings and your Twitter and whatnot, but you're out there selling cars. This is an important time of the year, right? And I think the other part is, and you know this, once we get these 90-degree days, cars start going kaplooey. The car you made it through the winter and you made it through the spring without people need cars in the summertime. This is when bad things happen when it's 90 degrees, right?
Yeah, if you have to replace an air conditioning system, that's a pretty sizable expense, and a lot of times it makes more sense just to trade that vehicle in and invest that money in a newer vehicle, newer or new vehicle. And we have no shortage of those, Nestor. Over 800 vehicles in stock, lots of convertible Mustangs, and also pre-owned convertibles that are different brands, but it's always a great time of the year to come out and see us and take advantage of the savings.
All right, back on to the Ravens here and Earl Thomas and the difference in the oxygen in the room around here. We remember when Ray left and Ed Reed left. Certainly Seattle, Earl Thomas with the middle finger off the gurney, the whole deal. Getting him right and having the next 3 years be what Eric Weddle represented, which was an incredible – Eric Weddle was one of the best things around here the last couple of years, quite frankly, And I know he couldn't play as well at the end, and we've talked about the limitations and all that. I'm expecting far more physically than that out of Earl Thomas, but a very, very similar way with leadership and back then and film study and recognizing things for all the players. And this is a better secondary than we've had around here, even without Earl Thomas. We have really solid football players on the back end. This should be the kind of secondary we're seeing dancing in the end zone, right? And doing end zone dances, because I'm expecting the secondary to score a couple touchdowns here.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the secondary level of talent is much more improved with the addition of Earl Thomas. My biggest concern, of course, is communication. Eric Weddle he knew what was coming. He was able to set up the defense in the back end. C.J. Mosley and Terrell Suggs handled the front end. So my biggest concern is Patrick Koulatsos and Kenny Young, in addition to Earl Thomas, can they become a cohesive unit and able to put the right pieces in the right places? Terrell Suggs was a monster, not just physically as a player, but also cerebral. He would watch a lot of game film, and he would tell the younger guys, "Hey, play's coming this way, play's going that way. It's a run, it's a pass." Same thing on the back end with Weddle and C.J. Mosley. That's the experience that the Ravens have got to replace and got to figure out. But from a talent standpoint, from a physicality standpoint, that secondary should be lights out this year.
Den, for the offseason and finding these new character individuals, whether it's Earl Thomas to come in, we talked about the character of Eric Weddle, character of C.J. Mosley, Joe Flacco. Mark Ingram was an impressive sight to see, and talking about Drew Brees, and was, kind of a lengthier piece that was done at the podium last Thursday. And I said this to Luke, and I know you heard me say it, but it's nice to have grown-ups around. You love that youthful energy of young people around your place and around your building, but at some point, you got to have somebody around there that sold cars somewhere else to come in and bring a little bit of that energy, too.
Yeah, Mark Ingram, he reminds me of Bull Durham, the wily, crafty veteran you bring in. He's been there, he's done that. He knows what it takes to prepare himself physically, mentally, psychologically for the season. He's great in the film room, breaking down things for the players. He's very much a leader. He's the kind of guy who'll be the first guy on the practice field and the last guy to get off the field.
Alabama guy, by the way, too. So he brings Nick Saban with him everywhere he goes, right?
Yeah, he's a Bama guy for sure. He's the kind of player that makes you better. You talk about culture, and to me, in a lot of cases, culture beats strategy any other week. So I think when you do have great team culture, and when you look at these guys and how they interact with each other on social media, Tony Jefferson and Marlon Humphrey and Deshaun Elliott, and even Mark Ingram, he gets in there, he gets involved. That tells you a lot about the team. I also got a chance to hang out with Ed Reed last week. He talked about a great guy. And I was able to pick his brain a little bit about the back end and secondary stuff that he looks at. But he was very excited about this edition of the Baltimore Ravens. He also brought up Mark Ingram as stepping up and becoming a team leader for this team.
Dennis Koulatsos joining us here. He is, of course, at Coons Florida Security Boulevard, always with the SSV on WNST, out on Twitter, and on Thursday from 3 until 5. I will be joining him as we get ready here for a real summertime, right? I mean, this is when we're getting into it. We got some OTAs, we got some mini camp, but there is that sort of oxygen of summer here and stuff like you going fishing and doing other stuff, right?
No doubt about it. We have the June 1st veteran cuts to look forward to as well, and something to keep an eye on. I'm fascinated that they're chasing Gerald McCoy. He's coming in for a visit. I don't know why they would look to tie up more money in another defensive tackle. This is a position that they're very, very deep at, Nestor, so it's kind of puzzling. He's not a rush end. I can see them going after Jadeveon Clowney, even though they don't have the cap space, but this move, just talking to him, just doesn't make any sense to me, unless they're trying to drive up his market price so that way the Browns can make a mistake.
Well, you talk about the interior line and where they are with the money they've spent on Brandon Williams and where they would be with Pierce and where they would be with Judon in the end of all of this if they're expecting a monster year. If they're going to win 13 games this year, if they're going to be playing in the second, third week of January, or dare I say when I get down to Miami Beach in early February, the D-line is, they expect a couple of these guys to sort of play out of their mind, and they're paying Williams to play like that. But there might be more money that needs to get tied up there already going into this offseason because Judon would be next guy up to get paid, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would save some money at this point to try to sign the guy that they have. They drafted Dylan Clark. Gerald Willis is supposed to be a very good defensive tackle that can break down the pocket. It should have been a third or fourth round draft pick. Had some off-field issues, but to me, it just makes zero sense to pursue this player. We already have enough of what he brings to the table. I don't see much of an upgrade between him and anyone else we have with the roster at this time.
You ever go fly fishing, or are you just a traditional cast kind of guy?
I have a couple of friends that are fly fishermen, and I love to fly fish. I've been up in Pennsylvania and also to Montana to fly fish.
See, I've never done any of this stuff. This is why I pick your brain about this stuff because summertime and I'm doing Baltimore Positive, so I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do in my retirement because it's not going to be golf, right? Might be tennis, depending on how my limbs and my hips and stuff hold up. Yoga for sure, but the fishing thing. My buddy Tony Tochterman and Dan Rodricks did this big thing. Lefty Cray was a man I knew, right? A man I knew well. He would always come into the office early in the morning and talk to us. And I mean, Lefty was a legend around the office back in, and I had no idea that he's the greatest fly fisherman in the world. Mike Marlowe used to tell me that. Larry Harris and those guys would say, like, Lefty's like a legend. And now Lefty has passed on, and they're doing all this stuff. And now that I did the trip to Montana last year, remember I chased Pearl Jam around, that I've decided that if I'm going to fish, it probably shouldn't be a Pretty Boy with Dan Rodricks. It should be like in Montana with you,
Well, I'll take your bass fishing. You'll catch so many bass you're going to get tired of catching them. But Lefty Craig was a legend. I used to love reading his columns. I would always, devour any kind of fishing information.
I turned down a chance to go fly fishing with Lefty Craig. What am I, nuts?
Yeah, you know what?
He begged me to go out with him. I mean, he literally, and I just wouldn't. I was 18, 19, 20 years old. You know what I mean? Like, getting me to sit still then. Dick Irwin took me out on the Youghiogheny River to go whitewater rafting one weekend up there. So, I mean, I did. Dan Rodricks calmed me down, took me out on the Pretty Boy one day on a little boat to go fishing. But I was, that's crazy to not have gone fly fishing with Lefty Cray. I mean, that's a life's regret right there.
Well, I'll tell you about the life fishing that when I was in high school, we'd go fishing at Loch Raven every day after school. And also, when I started selling cars in the late 80s, I would take my lunch break and go to Loch Raven Reservoir for about an hour and catch a couple of bass, eat a sandwich, and go back to work.
You catch and release, though, right?
Catch and release, yep. Don't eat them. Now, I'll eat some smaller fish like crappie and perch, but bass I'll let go.
All right. Well, maybe one day you and me on a lake. I would tell everybody I'm probably too loud of an individual to go fishing with, but listen, I have a cat now, Dennis, so I can use my quiet voice.
Yeah, the fish can't hear you. They're underwater, so you'll be fine.
You keep saying that. All right. Here's Dennis Koulatsos. He's back to selling cars. Go find him at Coons Ford Security Boulevard. You can find him on Thursday here from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. Dennis, you're caught and released. All right? There he goes. Dennis Koulatsos at Coons Ford Security Boulevard. Always sponsoring our WNST tech service. Get you all your updates, any breaking news, and as Luke has pointed out, we don't want any breaking news out of Owings Mills this time of year. You can find me anywhere the internet travels, out on Facebook or Twitter. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.